Listen." McHenry wakened from a sound sleep, with every sense alert, as when, in old war times, the reveille broke the brief rest of the camp between march and march. It was such a soft whisper, in spite of its distinctness, that he wondered if he had done such an unprecedented thing as to dream.
"Funny,"
he murmured.
"Vexatious, too. How's a man to get to sleep again?"
He threshed about from side to side in acute restlessness for a time, then forced himself to lie still while his reluctant brain revolved one after another of the various infallible processes for putting oneself to sleep. The sheep and the stone wall, the reversed multiplication table, and all the others he had heard of. The known inefficacy of all these methods is the best indication that he was not dreaming, when the whisper hissed in the air again. "Listen." This time it was loud as well as distinct, piercing as well as sibilant, imperious as well as solemn. McHenry's senses could not start into keener consciousness than they already possessed, but as the tone of voice seemed to demand some special manifestation of his attention, a queer, quivering stream of sensation surged up his spine, climbing nerve by nerve, till it reached the back of his head, which felt cold, very cold. Well, and what was he to listen for? He had not realized before that the bed was short of blankets. "Your son, Spencer, has disappeared, and has not been heard of for 3 days. McHenry dashed the covers on the footboard and sprang to the door, which he never locked. He flung it wide open and cast a sharp glance, that no flying figure could escape, down the lighted hall. A dim idea of some malicious lurker at the keyhole must be resigned. Besides, who would play him such a silly trick? With a frown he resisted the impulse to raise the window higher and see if anyone could be hiding underneath it. Pshaw! He was determined not even to allow himself fear, let alone an exhibition of fear. And anyhow, the voice came directly from his bedside. He was angry that he could not convince himself that it had not come at all. The season was winter, and his teeth were chattering already with the draught from the open door. Some men not to be despised either, would have left it open with its flood of sociable light. McHenry sharply shut it, and then scrambled back into bed, with the grim reflection that if he were a woman he would look beneath it. Your son Spencer has disappeared, and not been heard of for 3 days. It was his disturbed mind now that was unhappily rehearsing the sinister suggestion, and the difference between those silent, impalpable utterances that spoke to the brain without troubling the ear, and the clear, hissing syllables that had waked him, made McHenry miserably certain of the reality of the latter. His was the man's affection, latent rather than active, waiting some such shock as this to assert itself. A mother probably would not have let her only son leave home with a dozen college companions for an extended European tour, or, letting him go, would have thought of him daily and hourly, instead of permitting him to almost slip her mind, as McHenry had done through the past few busy weeks. But, great heavens, a man might be pardoned for feeling upset over a horrid hint, conveyed in this uncanny fashion, that some mysterious danger overhung his boy. Even if a dream, it was scarcely a soothing one. "What on earth did we eat last night?" thought McHenry, to whom indigestion was a word without meaning. Plainly, here was no clue, besides the fact that his stomach was Welsh rabbit proof. They had the simplest affair, for the sake of Heller, who was a suffering dyspeptic, eternally on diet, and for the sake of Ward, his other guest, who was an aggressive teetotaler. The cork of so much as a beer bottle had not been popped. In addition, they had not once mentioned Spencer. He was not sure that Ward even knew he had a son. Instead, they had talked over the old stirring times of the Civil War, in which Heller and McHenry had been the youngest and rawest of recruits, McHenry coming out of it with some medals, which he carefully kept, and a major's title, which he dropped.
"Confess the truth now, McHenry," Heller had laughingly urged. "You have proved your courage in battles enough to dare to tell us when you felt the worst scared. Before action or during it? For either before or during or both scared we all were." "If I told you the truth, you would not believe me," McHenry had answered. "Ward, let's have some of your youthful reminiscences."
"I'd rather hear you tell the truth," said Ward curiously.
"Well, then," McHenry had begun slowly, "I don't know that I ever before put it into words, for fear of its sounding boastful, but the literal fact is, I never was scared at all." "Oh, come now," Heller had said banteringly. "I told you you would say that," reminded his host. "Do you suppose I take credit for a mere mental or physical peculiarity as for a virtue? It just happens that fear and I never met up, as our cracker guides used to express it. As a baby, I never was afraid of the dark. As a boy, I never was afraid of anything, from a ghost to a whipping. As a man, my nerves, well, I don't seem to have any, that's all. It's purely physical, I tell you. Fear and I may meet some day, but I'm 52 years old, and there is not much time left."
This part of the conversation, recurring to McHenry as he lay tossing on what had suddenly become the hardest of beds, made him thankful that he had not paid tribute to fear by looking out of the window, nor yet by opening the door, nor yet by calling Paget his manservant, the only other occupant of the great lonely house. What could Paget do, or what light on the mystery could be thrown by every gas jet in the house if Spencer had suddenly disappeared? Let's see. His last letter was 4 weeks old, but that was nothing uncommon. With 12 companions, great Scott, the boy made the 13th of the party. That cold feeling at the back of his neck recurred, and all his anger could not warm it up again. These things, taken separately, were absurd trifles, only significant to the superstitious, but they made a most disagreeably consistent total. Also, the party had departed on a Friday. He did not believe in any of that nonsense, but neither did he believe in supernatural voices delivering bedside warnings to wide-awake men in their sober senses. He had only heard them, which was far more convincing. Why had he not kept Spencer at home? His letters sounded happy enough. The last one came from Switzerland. And suddenly, a vivid, terrible picture flashed before him of some deep moraine or glassy cliff, with his boy's frozen face lying in the snow. Or no, perhaps he had slipped and fallen on some jagged rock. "Paget!" shouted that individual's master. An unnecessary summons, considering the rate at which the servant's bell was ringing. The rope had not ceased its violent vibrations against the wall before Paget appeared, in his night raiment, rubbing his eyes. He was a sleek, mild Englishman, just entered into McHenry's service. "Yes, sir?" he inquired, without resentment. "You rang, sir." "Get me some blankets," said his master curtly. "If you know no better than to strip them off a bed in January, you won't suit me." "Yes, sir," Paget assented.
There was 2 pairs of blankets on, and I didn't take any off." "It's a misunderstanding," said McHenry hastily. "The room chills off just before morning. Sorry I called you up out of bed." "Yes, sir. Anything more, sir?" McHenry hesitated. I suppose you locked up everything downstairs tonight, didn't you?" He was aware that it was the first time he had ever known or cared whether there was a key or bolt in the house. "So that it wouldn't be possible for anyone to get in?" Paget was sure he had. After the man's withdrawal, McHenry set his teeth and said distinctly, positively, almost roughly, "The boy's all right, you fool." And in spite of a laborious mental review of the momentous facts that 12 12s are 144, 12 11s 132, and so forth, or backward, managed before morning to obtain a frayed and ragged sort of sleep, worn so thin in spots as to let dreams through. The value of these visions as mirrors of one's closest thoughts and cares was proven by his dreaming, not of Spencer, but of a flour mill run by an ancient goat, to which he, as a farmer, brought a sack of meal that the goat would not grind for fear of catching his beard between the millstones. In the morning he resolutely left for business before the mill came. The Monday's mail, when the foreign letters were delivered, with a white letterless plate staring up into his eyes, he might possibly, after 52 free years, met fear at last. "I can't afford it," he said decisively. When at noontime he encountered the husband of his only daughter, who said, "Hello, why don't you come take dinner with us tonight?" He felt he could not afford to accept the invitation either. Mary might mention that she had not heard from Spencer lately, and when she found that he too had no recent news, might ask, in a woman's idiotic way, "You don't suppose anything could happen to him?" And the question, on top of last night's experience, might upset his present perfect mental balance. That was why he did not cable Professor Rush, who had charge of Spencer's party, and end the suspense. Had not Professor Rush also access to telegraph wires, in case anything had happened to Spencer? And what right had he, Randolph McHenry, to have such a thing as suspense over a silence which was the rule rather than the exception with his heir? Just because of a mysterious... He sought around for a noun to follow the adjective, and could not find it. Nevertheless, as he approached the house that night, he felt a queer sensation, more familiar to the rest of us than to him, Randolph McHenry. Poets describe this sensation as the heart standing in the mouth, but it is more like a sudden, awe-inspiring flop of the stomach. The silver letter tray on the hall table was quite empty. All his business mail went downtown. "No letters, Paget?" asked McHenry. The man was new. He might have put it somewhere else. "No, sir," said Paget. That night's rest for McHenry was broken, not by the voice of warning, but by his expectation of the voice, in default of its impressive command to listen. He listened for hours, in a physical state which he defined as feeling as if an ice-cold hair, just one, were being slowly and relentlessly trailed all over your body, and a mental state which he could not define. Somehow, his not hearing it tonight increased rather than removed his conviction that it had been no hallucination last night. Someone's trick, perhaps? Someone who had been nettled to hear him declare himself free from fear. But Heller and Ward were the only men in whom he had ever thus confided. Quick distrust of them both surged up in him. Heller loved a practical joke. Ward had one of those reputations for knowing a great deal that cost men the confidence of their fellows. He knew himself to be thinking absurdities and continued to think them. "No letters, Paget?" he asked the next Thursday, knowing that the next foreign mail came in on that day. He had waited for the postman this time. As the man answered in the negative, his master looked with sudden attention into his blinking, lidded, superhumanly respectful countenance. It had occurred to him during the past few days that there might be a conspiracy against him. It occurred to him now that Paget might be a part of it. It was such an easy matter to suppress a letter. Now that he thought of it, the man looked sly. He had taken him on the recommendation of a friend, but perhaps all his friends had some spite or scheme against him, to be mysteriously gained by attacking his one vulnerable spot, his deep, undemonstrative love for his boy. Feverishly explaining that he had some private papers to attend to, he felt a nervous need of propitiating Paget, or at least throwing him off his guard. He stayed at home from the office to watch the man. Why need the fellow wear those confounded felt slippers, so that you never knew where he might be lurking? Every time the bell rang, he stole out into the hall as softly as though he himself might be felt-shod, to see if it were the postman. By afternoon, he acted on a sudden impulse to send the man out on a fictitious errand that he might tend the door himself. Still, no letter came. Perhaps the postman was in it, whatever it might be. "Cub!" he suddenly broke out, with the strong, savage resentment we only feel against those we love and worry over. "Why the devil can't he write? Is he in it too?" In the evening, Ward dropped in with the news that Heller was in a hospital. It was significant of McHenry's self-engrossment that only his second thought was of sympathy and concern for his friend, his first being, "Well, he has nothing to do with it." "Yes," continued Ward, "we had not left your house 10 minutes the other night when he had one of his old acute attacks, almost amounting to convulsions. I called a cab and sent him at once to the hospital." McHenry's fist came down on the table. "Poison!" he shouted, to the other's astonishment. "I had bad dreams myself that very night, and I believe that scoundrel Paget drugged or poisoned or did something to the food." Ward stared at him. "Why, McHenry, you're a sick man. Poison? Nonsense. Heller has these attacks periodically. You want bromo-seltzer to settle your nerves. Had I not better stay all night with you?" But McHenry shortly refused. If he was going crazy, he would go crazy alone. Besides, if the voice spoke tonight, he might be startled into betraying symptoms which Ward, not having known him so long as Heller, might interpret as fear. He almost wished the voice would come again, that he might analyze it and dispassionately decide whether it were fact or fancy, that he might question it, that it might give him some such comforting intelligence that Spencer had turned up all right, and that he, McHenry, would hear from him on the following Monday. Good God, how long to wait! Or that he could give a fierce spring at the impalpable presence that uttered the words, and choke the life out of it, if life it had. But though he listened and quivered all night, it did not come. He had retired, leaving his door open, breaking the habit of a lifetime. Toward morning he rose and locked it, another deviation from the habit. Yet somehow he could not bring himself to cable. It was their place to wire him if anything were wrong. Consequently, nothing was wrong, since they had not wired him. There was much logic and little comfort in this view, which he knew another blank Monday would abruptly destroy. "Paget!" he began sternly, when the Monday came, and with it no letter, then stopped and dismissed the man. The time had come to yield to a senseless disquiet.
give heed to a superstitious presentiment and cable at once to know if all were well with Spencer. Of course, only one answer would come, and he well knew the dear laconic initials which would revive his sickening heart more than tomes of logic. Dear G. OK. Yours, S. McH. My son, he cried out, in anguish grown suddenly unbearable. He bowed his head, realizing that he had finally met fear. With fingers no longer clenched to disguise their tremblings, he wrote a brief, agonized question on a telegraph blank and rang the messenger call, unwilling to trust Paget in such a matter. While he waited for an answer, the habit of self-restrained years flickered up in him in a faint revulsion against things he could not justify to his common sense. If Mary had no news from Spencer either, then he would send the message. He would go to Mary's. 52 is old, very old, to be alone in a house with a smooth, blinking devil of a servant whose every movement made him start and cringe, for it had come to that pass, and liable to calls from friends who might be in the damnable conspiracy against his peace. When the messenger came, he sent him for a cab, and bidding Paget forward any mail. What a sardonic joke with the whole postal and telegraph systems of Europe and America, agreed to keep him on tenterhooks about his son, was swiftly driven to his daughter's house. Mary met him in the hall. "Father!" she cried in alarm. "Why, your face is gray! Is it Spencer? He has not written me for weeks, but I thought nothing of it." The bell rang violently while she spoke, and McHenry's hot hand felt for hers. "It's a telegram," he murmured huskily, saying, "Your son Spencer has disappeared and has not been heard of. Give it to me, you fool." To the leisurely messenger boy whom Paget had sent with the letter, which had arrived only a moment after his departure. "Don't stand staring up the staircase like that." "Somebody in there's got hysterics," confided the employee of the ADT to the cabman, who still waited for his dismissal. "And it ain't delayed either. Say, my grit ain't never gone back on me, and I'm clost on 15 now." McHenry clawed piteously at the letter, which his nervous fingers could not get open. "You tear the envelope," he said to Mary, then snatching it jealously from her, read, "Dear Dad, I'm okay. I would have written sooner, but that I knew you knew I was all right, and, Dad, I've been busy chasing her. 'Nough said, isn't it? I met her at a hotel in Geneva. Her party was going back to Paris, and I hadn't been introduced, and I just jumped on the train in lots less time than it takes to write this, and it was 3 days before it occurred to me that the fellows might wonder what had become of me. Dad, I'll write you all about her if she says she'll have me. At present my head's in a whirl. It's a good thing for you and me, however, that Doling broke his leg. Sounds humane, doesn't it? Fact is, the rest of the party got as nervous as a set of old women when I simply disappeared, without even a trunk or handbag, to say nothing of goodbye, which I own I was crazy enough to do. They went on to the village that came next on our itinerary, leaving messages for me to follow if I returned. At the end of 3 days they got scared, especially Doling, and nothing would do but that he should go back to Geneva, cable to you, and set detectives looking for me. On the way his foot went through a bridge and he broke a leg, and was taken in and nursed by mountaineers. They couldn't speak a word of his tongue, nor he of theirs, so there was no way whatever to send his message, thus luckily saving you considerable uneasiness over your prodigal son. Doling did his best, however. He's a studious thing, deeply interested in psychology and all that ruck, and he says he lay awake in the night trying to send you a telepathic communication that I had disappeared and had not been heard of for 3 days. Glad he didn't succeed, as I wrote them the very next day. I ought to write lots more.
But if you get a longer letter, you'd feel sure it was a forgery. In the name of yours neglectfully, Spencer. Mary, said McHenry, heavily sinking back. He's all right. I don't know whether you understand it or not, but your brother Spencer is all right.
You're not all right, said his daughter with a frown in her forehead. You were never like this before. I shall send for the doctor.
The doctor came, talked vaguely of nerves not quite in their normal condition, of the restorative effects of sea voyages, and finally, when McHenry opened the lips which he had, at first, obstinately kept sealed, of the objective and subjective mind. Your subconscious was probably charged over heavily with your son's absence, he explained, whether you knew you worried about him or not. Good gracious, interpolated McHenry dismally. Have I got a thing like that inside of me? If I'd known that, I'd have been afraid long ago. And you either dreamed an oddly coincident dream or really were in telepathic sympathy with that abnormally persevering young man. More than that, I don't know. If you want more light, consult a clairvoyant. My business is repairing the ravages of the Welsh rabbit and the pneumococcus. No, I thank you, said his patient with a shudder. The first stage of insanity is quite enough for me. Hello! Ward was hailed by Heller, now as brisk a semi-invalid as ever hospital discharged, a few days later. Whom do you suppose I met on the deck of the Sabrina when I went to see another friend off? Whom but McHenry? Says he will join his son somewhere on the continent. Has had a complete nervous breakdown and is ordered rest. Doesn't sound credible, his having nerves, does it? Oh, said Ward, we all have them.